Hi, everyone. Welcome to the US Arc channel. I'm Ron Funk. I'm here with Phil Goss, the president of US Arc.
Hello, everybody.
When you started with US Arc as the US Arc president, what were the biggest challenges that you were facing at that point?
Well, there was a lot going on with US Arc was a couple $100,000 in the hole when I started. So let's just say it was pretty much a sunken ship. And thankfully to the reptile community and reptile industry, they resubmerged the ship, and here we are still going 11 years after that. But yeah, it was not looking too hot for the continuation of US Arc. But we're back 11 years later, and actually less than 11 months after I started, we filed that federal lawsuit, which is what a lot of people, why they know US Arc was because we won that federal lawsuit to reverse the interstate ban on any transportation of species listed as injurious under the Lacey Act. But yeah, it was pretty hot and heavy when I started. So not only did we have to get US Arc back in the black, but we had a federal lawsuit going on that we had to fund. So yeah, there was a lot going on. And when I started, it was pretty much only one type of legislation that was going on. It was Dangerous Wild Animals Act, DWAs. And that was the listing of certain species. And then you could not keep those species in a city or state. A lot of times it was lions, tigers, bears, the big mammals are what we usually see. But then a lot of times you would see something like all constrictor snakes added to it. And all constrictor snakes is corn snakes, king snakes, milk snakes, ball pythons, sand boas. I mean, this is a lot of commonly pet snakes. It has nothing to do with the size of the animals. We had a lot of big wins over the last 11 years. And when I started, the legislation that we mainly saw was those Dangerous Wild Animal Acts.
So the Lacey Act, just give an overview of what the Lacey Act is.
Well, the Lacey Act has a couple different sections and titles and does various things. But what we were concerned with, and I mean, it's overreach no matter how you look at it. I don't care what argument you want to make. The way it was used was just overreach, because what it did was it banned any type of transportation. So this wasn't just commercial sales. This was any type of transportation across an invisible line, across a state line, of a species that was listed as injurious. And historically, this had been applied to things that could have had an impact in a large portion of the United States. So big-headed carp, for example, big-headed carp are an issue in a lot of US states. European starlings were actually listed as injurious, and then they got delisted because they know there's nothing they can actually do about European starlings. So it wasn't doing any good to have them on there. But then what the United States Fish and Wildlife Service did was they listed species that were commonly held in trade and as pets in most of the United States. So reticulated pythons, Burmese pythons were listed on there. Green anacondas, obviously not as common, but some people do have them and breed them. And then it made it illegal to transport them. So even if your family got relocated, if you were in the military and you had to go to a different base, if you had a veterinarian that was across the state line, for any reason to move that animal across the state line was a federal crime. I mean, it was just crazy. You could still breed them and sell them interstate, but you couldn't move them across state lines.
Yeah, and I can break in on that from a legal perspective. The reason why the federal act is so concerned about transporting across state lines is that's what gives the federal government the authority to act constitutionally. So
Right.
they can deal with what's imported, and they can deal with interstate commerce. And so that's why the Lacey Act is directed towards the transportation and not just the keeping.
Originally it was to protect a lot of birds, for example. So it was protect people, poaching birds and using the feathers. Back in a time when bird feathers were really popular in hats. Like you said, they had to cross state lines before the federal government could get involved. But again, that was for sales. So this new, it was, it applied to pets and just people who were taking their animals across state lines. It didn't even necessarily have to be commerce. When I came in, Burmese pythons was the big species that was listed because they were listed in 2012. And then while I was president in 2015 is when they added reticulated pythons, which are probably, I mean, they're more common now than Burmese pythons are as pets. And we filed our lawsuit late in 2013. It was a little over 3.5 years because not only did we have the initial lawsuit, but then FWS appealed it, so then it had to go to appellate court. And it was a really long process and a whole lot involved in a whole lot of pages of court documents. And when we appealed, actually, the Humane Society of the United States and the Center for Biological Diversity intervened. And so they're all three listed.
My experience with that is that judges all across the country are influenced a lot by some of these big name groups and these powerful groups. And that can have a big effect on an appeal. And it can prove daunting to a little organization like USARK when you've got these other groups coming in and joining and trying to tear you down. How did that feel for you?
Yeah, so we had USARK, who at the time, so my first year, I think we brought in $340,000 the first year I was president. So when this went to appellate court, not only was it our little organization against the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, Department of the Interior, government agencies, but it was also the Humane Society of the United States signed on as a defendant, and so did the Center for Biological Diversity. So we had our $300,000 versus the 100 million plus of the Humane Society of the United States, plus the tens of millions from the Center for Biological Diversity. And we're just little USARK over here. But at the end of the day, the court ruled on what the law said and the historical record of how FWS interpreted injurious under the Lacey Act, and the court made the decision based on facts versus, who was on there and being influenced by the defendants.
The fact that you were able to withstand that really is a credit to not just what you've done, what your lawyers, USARK's lawyers done. It really just is amazing. And I can also say sometimes just getting them to understand and follow the law, because part of the problem is the people who draft the laws, who write the laws, aren't always clear in what they're doing. And that's a very charitable way to put it, I think. and so what you were facing certainly was daunting, and the fact that you prevailed and protected the industry from this. And I think there are a lot of people, especially as the super dwarf reticulated pythons are becoming more popular. They're a lot more manageable, and they would have been affected by this because they're reticulated pythons.
Yep, just one species. Yep.
Yeah. And so I think there's what USARK was able to do going up against not just a government agency, but all these huge, literally $100 million organizations. I've seen their books. How was that able to essentially serve as a springboard for you into what's been going on since then?
It would have been nice if it was a springboard, but like I said, it was almost 4 years. So it was the longest springboard ever because, during that 4 years, it was just, almost everything we were bringing in was going just to fund that lawsuit. But then on top of that, we had all these dangerous wild animal acts and other legislation being thrown at us that we had to try and, stop. But, at some points we had 6 or 7 months where literally nothing happened. So, that's just part of the process sometimes when you got a lawsuit like that. Our initial complaint, it only included the species that were listed in 2012. So then about 1.5 years after we filed that, they listed more species. So then we had to amend our original complaint. So like you're saying, then that adds up because then you amend your complaint and then FWS has to file their motions and it's there was a whole lot going on. Thank you for watching this video and learning a little about USARK from over a decade ago. And thank you to everyone who supports our channel by subscribing and sharing our videos. And that's all for this one.